Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 637, and today's date is April 8th, 2015, and the title of this episode is The U.S. Government Central Bankers Have Pushed the Middle East War to the Next Level. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that a huge payment is due April 9th for Greece. They owe this to the IMF. And we understand that the Greek government is looking at different methods of saying, hey, we do not owe this and we're not going to pay the debt. They're trying the World War II reparations, saying, hey, Germany, you owe us more than what we owe you. And actually, we don't owe the debt. We understand that Cyprus is meeting with Putin today. And Greece did not come out formally and say, hey, listen, can you give us financial help to pay off this debt? But what Putin did say is that, listen, if Greece decides to privatize, Russia, the companies in Russia, would love to invest in Greece, especially in the ports, airports, and pipelines. And we see Greece is also looking at what is called odious debt. Under international law, odious debt is a legal theory which holds that national debt incurred by a regime for purposes that do not serve the best interests of the people inside the nation should not be enforceable. Such debts are thus considered by this doctrine to be personal debts of that government, the regime of that government. And those debts do not transfer to the people. This is basically having someone sign a contract under coercion. It can't be done. Almost like here in the United States, all this debt that the government is creating right now is not for the people. This debt is being given all around the world. It's created for war, and this is not in the best interest of the people. And we can see odious debt is now a reality in Greece. The head of the Greek parliament and Syriza member released two videos which have promptly gone viral, designed to promote the investigative parliamentary committee to look into the circumstances surrounding the signing of the country's two bailout agreements that led Greece to implement its austerity measures. The committee will examine how Greece entered into the bailout agreements with its international lenders. You have to remember Goldman Sachs was involved with this. And we can see there was something underhanded that went on during that time period, and this is why they are looking into it. And again, we have to remember, if debt is created not in the best interest of the people are not responsible for that debt. And we all need to remember this, no matter which country you are in. Now, out in Germany, we can see that this economic collapse is now starting to spread across Europe. Yes, we saw it in Cyprus, we saw it in Greece. We see that France, Portugal, Spain, UK, everyone's affected by this. And we see that it's like a domino effect. There are countries that are a lot worse off, that are in a collapse. And then we see other countries that are heading from a recession into depression. And we see other countries now that are moving towards a recession. Germany, basically, right now, saw the biggest drop in factory orders since June, negative 1.3%, missing expectations for the second month in a row, for the first consecutive drop since May 2013. And we have to remember that the Baltic Dry Index is continually declining. It has dropped another 3 points to 580. Here in the United States, what do we see? Well, we see the same thing. Manufacturing, factory orders, declining. People are not going to the stores. They're not purchasing. The American people are tapped out. They just don't have the money anymore. But we know that the government, the central banking system, are continually creating programs to drag more and more people to take out debt. We see this with the student loans. We see this with the auto industry. We see this with the real estate industry. And basically, this is what they're doing right now. This is why they implemented the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac new program of 3% down, and we will accept subprime people. Other banks have taken this a step further, where they're saying, listen, we will do 0% down and we'll pay for your closing costs. New builders are saying, listen, we will pay for your closing costs. And they're trying to get people into the system. They're keeping the interest rates at 0, the lowest possible, to drag people in to the system, to take out more debt. This is how the bubble grows. Because you have to remember, the central bank, it's a private corporation. Their product is debt. If they do not sell debt, it collapses. It's almost like Dell or Microsoft. If they do not sell their services and their products, the company is doomed. The same thing with the central banking system. And right now we see mortgage applications, they ticked up a little bit, about 0.4% the week ending April 3rd. And we see refinancing applications, they fell by 3.3%. So those people in their homes, they're not refinancing at this point. Those people are saying, hey, I'm going to go buy a house right now because look, I can put 0% down. Interest rates are really low, and I can even get an adjustable rate mortgage, and my credit's bad. I'm going for it. I can own a home. We saw this back in 2007, 2008. Why do you think we had that subprime disaster? The subprime securities, they were rated AAA back then. So we can see exactly what's going on. We also understand, as we get closer and closer to the collapse, United States, UK, Canada, the European nations, New Zealand, Switzerland, they're going to push bail-ins. And what's very interesting, in a speech yesterday in Stockholm, Sweden, Vice Chairman of the Federal Reserve and former Governor of the Bank of Israel and former Chief Economist of the World Bank, Stanley Fischer, noted the following. As part of this approach, the United States is preparing a proposal to require systematically important banks to issue bail-in long-term debt that will enable insolvent banks to recapitalize themselves in resolution without calling on the government funding. This cushion is known as gone concern buffer. Basically, he's talking about bail-ins. Mr. Fisher gave no details as to whom in the United States was preparing the bail-in proposal and what bail-enable long-term debt is. Under the proposal bail-in scenario, the failure of a systematically important bank will receive no government funding to stay afloat. Instead, will just call on their loyal depositors to help out by taking whatever percentage of the depositors' money they need to stabilize the bank. And we understand the bail-in document that was created in 2012. I think it was November or December. And it was with the UK banks and the United States banks. They got together, they created this bail-in document, and then all of a sudden in 2013, February, Cyprus had a bail-in. Seemed like it was a test at that point in time. And then ever since then, all other nations decided to copy the bail-in document and implement them. And we can see that they are getting ready to do this. The IMF, the other day, the World Bank said, hey, you know something? To bring down the debt and to control the situation, we might have to tax everyone in their retirement, their savings, and basically what they're doing is stealing the money from every single person and giving it to the bankers. This is what they're looking to do. They're not doing it to help you. You have to remember, the central bankers, they have no loyalty whatsoever to any country, to any people. The loyalty is to themselves. They will start wars. They will start nuclear wars. They don't care. They're prepared for it. They're hoping that the population is thinned out. They're hoping they can start this over. Because they realize that their system is at its end game. There's nowhere else to go with this. They've already stolen the wealth from all of these countries and put them into major, major debt. How do you think the Rothschilds are getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier? This is what they've been doing for generations. And they're continually doing it. And again, they don't care what nation comes out as the winner, because they will get onto that nation, they will get onto that banking system and start it all over. It makes no difference to them. And we can see from all the nations throughout time that these fiat currency paper notes, it only lasts about 40 years, and we're a little bit over that at this point. We see out in Russia, they are making a deal with Thailand. Russian Prime Minister suggested Thailand consider creating a free trade zone with the Eurasian Economic Union. He said a free trade zone would be created in a similar way to the agreement with Vietnam. On the one hand, it's the Eurasian Economic Union, which consists of about 5 countries or 180 million people. Entering the territory of one country, you get to all 5 countries at once, he said. So it's a very nice deal. And this is what Russia and China are doing. They are pushing agreements, economic agreements, all throughout the world. But we see the Fed out there today continually keeping the illusion alive that everything here in the United States is absolutely fine. So Russia, China, the BRICS system, the AIIB, all making deals around the world, creating economic stability, helping countries build their infrastructure. Here in the United States, we see the soldiers garrisoned around the world, ready to push war at any chance they possibly can get. And we have the Fed telling us that everything is absolutely fine in this country. The economy is fine. The Fed just had their minutes. They're saying that, the job market is balanced. It looks good. They're not looking to raise interest rates because we know why they're not going to do this. Because it would completely crush the economy in a split second. Just like it did back in 2007 going into 2008, when people were just leaving their homes because they couldn't make the payments. The same thing would happen right now. The entire stock market, bond market, real estate market, auto industry, it would crumble in a split second. And there'd be nothing to stop it. Now, I just wanted to mention something about the Boston bombing. And we see Zohar, he was found guilty today. And he's eligible for the death penalty. But what's very interesting, and I have a picture here on the X22Report.com, and people on YouTube, you can see that. But when you look at the backpack of Zohar, you can see it is completely different, and his brother's backpack is completely different from the one where the bomb was and exploded. We could see the backpack that was used was on somebody else, which is part of the Kraft paid mercenary military unit who actually coordinated all of this. And this actually is reasonable doubt. And it's very surprising during the hearings, they'd never shown any of this whatsoever. Because if you did show this, people would have reasonable doubt. And we know the Boston bombing was a false flag event. Just look at the numerous videos and everything that went on there. It was completely a false flag event. Now, as we know, Obama signed that memorandum where they're allowing the illegals to come into this country. As soon as they step over the border, DHS, the Border Patrol, they cannot touch the illegals. They can't deport them. And we know that a federal judge in Texas has denied the federal government's request to lift a hold on President Obama's controversial immigration plan. He pretty much has stopped everything that was going on in Texas. And he's saying that, and this is coming from U.S. District Judge Andrew Hanen in Brownsville, he's saying that he's a little bit concerned because the government misled the court by revealing last month that it had granted expanded work permit renewals to about 100,000 illegal immigrants before the court blocked the administration from implementing its new policies. And right now, he's holding steady, saying no, it is illegal in Texas for anyone to follow the president's memorandum. And we understand why they're bringing the illegals in. There's many different agendas going on right here. But the major one is that the corporations wanted the illegals in the country. The people actually, when numerous polls have been taken, saying, no, they should be going through the proper channels. And I agree, if you like to come into this country. I know a lot of people that have come into this country from Lebanon, from Colombia. They went through the proper channels. They became a citizen. But these people who Obama wants in here, they want them in here because they can go to work in the corporations. This is why they're giving them work permits. Because the corporations don't have to pay the penalty on Obamacare, the $3,000 for each person. So they can avoid that and they can work any hours they want. They don't even qualify for Obamacare at this point, so they don't have to worry about that. And this is why the corporations have forced their way in and said, this is what we want. We backed you during elections, we paid you, and now you owe us. And you can see this is why this is being done. And of course, they're going to use them because now they can get student loans, they can go into the military, and you can see what they're doing. They can get auto loans, pump up the bubbles. This is what they're being used for. And we've come to learn that the government continually lies to the American people. The U.S. government started keeping secret records of Americans' international telephone calls nearly a decade before September 11th. Of course, they used the Patriot Act just to show that, oh no, now we're doing it legally, which they really aren't, because the Fourth Amendment, the rights of the people, overrides every single law the government puts out there. And if they're in violation, it is illegal. And of course, what they've done is that they spied on Americans way before 9/11. And this was using a DEA program, which they were looking for drug trafficking. And they collected millions of phone calls, millions of records. They went to the phone companies and said, you have to hand over these records to us. You do not have a choice in the matter. And the phone company said, oh yeah, here you go. Here are all the records. Here's everything that we have. That's fine. Go ahead. And we can see they took this and they expanded upon this with the NSA. I mean, right after 9/11, they came out, and of course, as we know, the Patriot Act was just pending right in the Senate. They had it all ready to go, and all of a sudden it was voted on and it was passed. And most of these bills are pending in the Senate, that if they can't get them passed, they have a special event to get them through. Actually, during the Boston bombing, which I do believe they were going after at the time, was to go and push that Dianne Feinstein bill. It was voted on that same day. And in the beginning, when you remember the Boston bombing, they were saying that this weapon, this bomb, was created with gunpowder, black powder. And they were going to try to use this to demonize the gun owners. But the whole thing went south. There were too many people with their phones taking pictures. They did shut the cell towers off to block the transmission of the pictures, but as soon as they turned them back on, everyone was still taking pictures. And then they sent them off. And there were too many pictures around showing what really happened. And the FBI had to reformulate what they were going to use as their main story. And all of a sudden, we had an explosion down in Texas, where all eyes were taken off the Boston bombing, and everything was shifted to Texas for one day. And then when everything was shifted back, all of a sudden, they had their man, Zokarv, who basically was an FBI informant. He had no idea what was going on, and his brother. They had no idea what was going on at that time. And they've learned from that experience, and I'm talking about the U.S. government central bankers, and it seems that they're putting forth a program from the Department of Homeland Security. They came up with a plan known as Standing Operation Procedure 303. After cellular phones were used to detonate explosives targeting a London public transportation system, SOAP 303 is a powerful tool in the digital age, and it spells out a unified voluntary process for the orderly shutdown and restoration of wireless services during critical emergencies, such as a threat of radioactive, improvised explosive devices. What are they really saying right now? Well, it seems the courts, through the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, is standing by the U.S. government and not allowing the release of the U.S. government plan to shut down the internet and cell phone service using SOP 303 in times of emergencies. In other words, if there is civil unrest, if there's a false flag, they will be shutting everything down. they are going to basically kill your phones, kill the internet, so nothing can be broadcast out there, because they had the problem during the Boston bombing. They're using the London explosion as their base case to say, this is the reason why we need to do this. And they've learned from their last mistake is they need to shut down everything and kill it. And this is why most of the phones have a kill switch built into them, where it will actually make your phone die during these types of emergencies. And we know they want to do this when the next big event occurs, when there's civil disobedience, when there's things that the government is doing that they don't want the people to see. They are getting prepared for all of this. And we can see they have programs in place to do all of this. Now, China is hoping that the U.S. will stop interfering in its territorial matters. Well, they're not going to. They are there to provoke China when the time is right. And they're continually doing this over and over and over. And those people who've been listening to me for a while, you've heard this story before. And I'll make it very quick for those people who are new. When a bully, like the United States, decides to provoke someone, they do it almost like a bully does in school, where you're walking down the hall and you poke someone and you pass them by day after day. After the 10th day, the kid can't take it anymore, so he lashes out. A teacher sees this and says, "Oh my God, out of nowhere, you just lashed out at this other kid. For what reason?" "Well, because they were poking me every single day for 10 days. And the teacher says, "Well, I've never seen this before. All I saw was you lashing out and hitting him." This is what the United States does. Slowly but surely, they poke, they poke, they poke. And they wait for each one of these nations to strike back. And the world sees the other nation striking back and never sees the poking. And this is at the stage we are at, because they're trying to get the war started. And right now, we see that China is saying, listen, back off right now. You are provoking us and meddling in places where it's not your business. And a spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said the U.S. Defense Secretary is out of line and should not be involved in the situation. China's position on the South China Sea and other territorial disputes remains consistent. We believe disputes with the respective sides should be settled in direct dialogue and consultation, and it is known that China has reached consensus of such talks with respective parties. We hope the U.S. will respect the will of China and these countries on the settlement of such disputes and the approval of other moves that will contribute to the strengthening of regional peace and stability, the spokesman said. And we can see right now, in a nice way, they're saying, listen, stop poking us right now. And this is what's happening in the Pacific, and this is why the United States is bringing 60% of its fleet to the Pacific area. This is why Ashton Carter is going over to see more and more of these countries to set up military bases, bring in military assets, because they're encircling China. We see it happening in Eastern Europe. It is happening all over the place. We see Hungary, who was doing a reverse flow to Ukraine, has said, you know something? We're not going to do this anymore. No more reverse supplies of natural gas to Ukraine. And at this point, Ukraine is continually paying Gazprom because they need the gas coming into their country, and they're giving them payments because without the payments, Russia will shut the gas off. And we see that other countries are starting to wake up and say, you know something, we don't want to be a part of this. Because you have to remember, the United States government, the central bankers, they don't care about war. They want war. They want it to cover up this entire economic collapse. They want it to be blamed on another group, another country. It's not going to stop the collapse. The collapse will continue, but it's a lot easier when it's happening to blame it on someone else. And this is what they're doing at this point in time. We see in Ukraine, ever since the coup d'etat, The economy has been getting worse and worse. I mean, they have 45% inflation right now. I mean, the value of their currency is dropping like a rock. The Ukrainian Association of Automobile Manufacturers reported that in the 3-month period, January to March 2015, as compared to the same 3 months of 2014, production of passenger cars plunged 96%. Commercial vehicles 23%, buses 43%, for an overall decline of 92%. In March alone, as compared to March 2014, passenger car production plunged 94.3%, which is just unbelievable. It is not getting better whatsoever in Ukraine. Ever since the United States government central bankers decided to go into this country and make them, which they're getting closer to being part of NATO, part of the EU, which they signed, the economy has been falling apart. This is why Ukraine, when Yanukovych was the real elected president, decided to go with Russia. He had a choice here. He looked at the European nations. He looked at Greece. He looked at Cyprus, France, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and said, whoa, they're in big trouble. Why do you think Iceland withdrew their membership application to the EU? They looked around and said, you know something? Not for us. Why do you think they're going to create their own money and they're getting rid of their central banking, their private central banking system, and transferring it to the government? Because they see with the IMF, with the central banking system, once you're involved, basically your country collapses. Because this is how their system works. They loan out $1, they expect $2 to come back. Where do you get that extra dollar? It can't happen, so they have to take out more debt. It's an impossible situation, and in the end, it completely collapses. Right now, Kiev is gradually returning to military actions. Russia is looking at the situation. Other countries are looking at the situation, and they're saying that the Ukraine authorities are returning to the course of military actions. It's on a smaller scale right now, so people really don't notice, but it's happening. We said this going back in time that Ukraine was mounting a major offensive with the first ceasefire, and guess what they did? They tried to have another go at it, and it didn't work. But this time, they're hoping it's different. They're getting weapons now from the UK, from the United States. They're bringing in tanks. They have military trainers on the ground training their armed forces. Yes, the US is there, and they are training. UK is there. Poland is there, and they're all training. They're getting ready. They have a draft. They're bringing in 250,000 more people into the armed forces. They have the right-wing sector breaking off, and they're becoming their own specialized armed forces. They're getting ready for something huge. And we can see Ukraine is going to sign several documents with NATO on military technical cooperation. This is coming from Yatsenyuk, which said this on today. The sides will sign a memorandum on cooperation and control, communications, intelligence, and surveillance in the framework of NATO's Partnership for Peace program. It's not for peace, it's for war. Ukraine must restore its armed forces exclusively, following the example of the strongest armies and strongest alliance that fight for peace in the world. Well, all we see right now is they're provoking and getting ready for war. And we can see this is exactly what's going on at this point in time. And Russia, again with China, instead of provoking war, they're looking at each one of these countries and saying, listen, let's make a deal here. Again with Thailand. Russia's out there saying, listen, we will supply weapons to you if we can get agricultural output from your country. They did this with Brazil. They did this with Venezuela. They did this with many other countries in the Middle East. And they're continually doing this. China's doing the same thing. We see the U.S. right now is selling about $1 billion worth of weapons to Pakistan. $952 million sale approved by the U.S. State Department on Monday will comprise of 15 AH-17 Viper attack copters, 1,000 Hellfire 2 missiles, The deal will also include engines, targeting, and positioning systems, and other equipment, according to an announcement by the Defense Secretary Cooperation Agency. This proposed sale of helicopters and weapons in Pakistan is going to help with the counterterrorism and counterinsurgency operations around the Middle East and in South Asia. Yeah, they're definitely getting ready for war. They're trying to keep the people back. Drone strikes are continually happening in Pakistan. They're keeping the people back. The government needs more weapons, more advanced weapons. They know this now. Look what's happened in Yemen, Lebanon, Libya, Iraq. The people are tired. They're sick and tired of the United States government central bankers coming into their country, taking it over, putting in a puppet regime, and the rights of the people are basically distinguished. And they have no rights. We see the U.S. military right now is asking Canada to install better missile sensors in the Arctic. Very interesting. I talked about this in previous reports where Russia, Canada, the U.S., they're all going to the Arctic, not just for the natural resources like natural gas and oil, but it's a great strategic location. And also, they need the missile sensors up there to detect incoming ballistic missiles. Because we know when the war goes hot, these countries, they're not like these little tiny Middle Eastern countries that don't have advanced weapons. These are major countries that have ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. And they're asking Canada right now to basically install new sensors which will replace the aging sensors in the Canada-US North Warning System along the old Arctic Distant Early Warning Line. And they're saying that they need to upgrade them because we're going towards war at this point in time. And this is why they're making the call to Canada to say, listen, we need to do this because we need to detect what is coming. As we know, the framework between the P5+1 countries and Iran has been formed. And we see countries are getting ready to do business with Iran at this point in time. Iranian oil officials are in Beijing this week to discuss oil sales and Chinese investments in Iran just days after the framework was established. China, Iran's largest trade partner and oil client, and has bought roughly half of Iran's total crude exports since sanctions against Iran were tightened in 2012. And Iran, once the number 2 exporter of OPEC, is looking to ramp up its exports quickly after the sanctions are lifted. And it's going to be very interesting in how they're selling their oil and what are they using to sell the oil. Are they using the US dollar? Are they using the yuan? Most likely, I will bet they are using the US dollar. And when this whole thing, come July 1st, and if this whole thing holds, and the sanctions are dropped, if we make it that far, we will see exactly what they're selling the oil for. And if they do sell it for the US dollar, it shows us this was a back-end deal. Because normally, Iran to China, why would they use the US dollar? There'd be no reason for it. China's purchasing oil from Russia using the yuan or the ruble. Why would they go ahead and use the dollar? Unless it was in the P5+1 agreement. There'd be no reason to do this whatsoever. Because we have to remember, the United States going into this, what are they getting out of it? What? They're going to limit their nuclear program? Ridiculous. They never even had a nuclear weapon. Now we see during all of this, the EU decided to reimpose sanctions on Iran. They did this on Iran's third largest bank and 32 shipping companies. Well, this shows that they're heading towards a peaceful resolution, that they want to push the P5+1 talks. No! Why would they do this at this point in time? Because certain government officials have different agendas. They answer to different countries. And this move, comes days after the P5+1 talks. And again, the countries are Russia, US, UK, China, France, and Germany. And it's amazing that Germany is part of this, France is part of this, and they decided to go along with this. It makes no sense whatsoever. We see that the war in the Middle East is escalating right now. The United States government, central bankers are now pushing it to the next level. Like I said, they don't care where the war starts because the players are the same. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, Brazil, Venezuela. So we can see right now that basically the United States has been accelerating its weapon supply to Saudi-led coalition. They're helping them. Actually, they're the ones who are orchestrating everything that's going on at this point in time. And we see right now that Iran has brought in ships. They brought in a destroyer, and they brought in another ship, and they parked them right near Yemen. And of course, everyone's out there saying this. The reason why this is because they're backing the Houthis. Well, I hate to say this, but you have to remember Iran is Shiite. The Houthis are Shiite. They're parking their ships out there. Of course, they're saying it's for piracy. I don't believe that. I believe they do have an interest in what's going on there. Do I think they're really involved? No, because this has been going on for quite a while. And the Houthis were going along with the president at the time, and he kind of burned them. And now the Houthis want the U.S. government, central bankers, out of their country. The puppet regime does not support them whatsoever. And this was going on way before Iran and everything else. This went back quite a while. And we have to remember, in all of these countries, when the United States goes into these countries and says, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to remove your elected government and we're going to replace them with a puppet regime, a lot of the people there don't like this. Look at Ukraine, Crimea, southeastern people, and we can see that since they don't like this, they're going to fight and try to get back their country. And of course, the puppet regime left the country. The president left Yemen. And the United States is orchestrating all of this. Right now, we see the U.S. has brought in 2 U.S. aircraft carriers, the Teddy Roosevelt and the Vinson. We understand that the Iwo Jima, the big deck amphibious ship, was supposedly brought there for evacuation purposes, but the U.S. government is not evacuating anyone. So we know that these ships are not there for evacuation. They were there, put into place, to eventually go into and help the coalition forces in Yemen. And we can see they are really escalating the war at this time. We see an Egyptian military official who wants to remain anonymous decided that, listen, the ground forces are going to enter the war. The timing of such a move, which would be a significant escalation in the Saudi-led air campaign in Yemen, is still being discussed right now. But the Egyptian military source said it could happen as soon as 2 or 3 days once they get everything worked out. And we know they're getting ready for a major ground invasion. Everything is set up, ready to go. Forces are ready. They were asking Pakistan for weapons, for troops, for ships. The Saudis are ready to go. The U.S. has the green light now to refuel the jets of Saudi Arabia. And we can see they're getting ready to push this war forward. And as things get out of hand, this war is going to spread. It's going to spread into Libya. And when the time is right and the U.S. really needs to get involved, we have to remember something very important. Actually, 2 things. The authorization for war is pending. They don't see any reason why they need to even vote on this at this point in time. So the U.S. government central bankers will make a reason, and that's with some type of event. It could happen in the Middle East, it could happen in Europe, it could happen in the United States. But they will do something when the time is right to push that through. We also have to remember that Charlie Rangel has his draft bill pending in Congress. And this will enable the U.S. government central bankers to draft men and women. When the time is right, that will be passed also. And basically, all these are just sitting here waiting for the right time. And this is how they work. They know they need to get these things in place. Once they're in place, they see how the situation's going. They know their goal is to get war, period. It all depends on how they get there. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes they have to try a different tactic. Just like with Syria, going back to August of 2013, they tried many different things. They tried the sarin gas. Putin put a squash on that. Came out to be peace. They tried the Geneva II talks where they said, listen, we're going to have these talks. We want Assad to step down. He didn't do it. They're having the Islamic State in Syria right now. They're doing what they wanted to do back in August of 2013. They wanted to use the U.S. Air Force and the coalition forces to create the situation where the Free Syrian Army, or the Islamic State, because basically they're one and the same, they're able to capture more and more territory inside Syria. And we know for a fact that the Islamic State has tripled the size of their territory in Syria. And this is what they wanted to do back in 2013. So they had to change their tactics. They're going after Assad, period. You have to remember, Wesley Clark said that they had a specific order of targets. Syria, then Iran. They're still trying to do this. Of course, they said they were going to do this by 2008. Now it's 2015. So right now, we're heading towards this major collapse. They thought it was going to be done. They were going to be able to prop up the dollar. And things haven't gone as planned. We see the Syrian government delegation has agreed to the proposal set forth by Russian mediators during the second round of talks held in Moscow, where they're trying to get the opposition and the Assad government to come together and talk about peace. But the U.S. government doesn't want peace. This is why they needed the Islamic State. They are not governed by anyone. The United Nations cannot control them. The Free Syrian Army wasn't good enough. The Islamic State, their new proxy army, much better because they're branded as terrorists, so they can do whatever. And they can do it because it doesn't go back to the Islamic State. Like the Free Syrian Army, if they did something with sarin gas, chlorine gas, or anything else, it would come back to the United States because the United States is supporting them. This operation right now, they have the Islamic State, which is a proxy army. It doesn't come back to the U.S., to the central bankers. So they can do whatever they want, and it's the perfect situation for them to go after Assad at this time. We see the U.S. government is continually pushing the propaganda that Russian hackers were cyber attacking the White House computer system. Of course, this is coming out of CNN, and as we know, the corporate media spews propaganda. And of course, according to CNN, Russian hackers, which according to the left, telltale codes and other markers that they believe point to hackers working for the Russian government, that they've penetrated the White House computer system. Of course, if you read beyond just the first paragraph, it reveals that this was anything but an actual hack. The White House has said the breach only affected an unclassified system, so anyone could have accessed it at any time in reality. And if you notice, every time they have some type of cyber attack, it's only surface information where basically you can get this information anywhere. The hackers had access to sensitive information such as real-time, non-public details of the president's schedule. It's right on his website. It's already out there for the public. It's meaningless getting people's phone numbers, addresses. This isn't real information. It's always surface information. Because we know it's an inside job. And they're just trying to show everyone, look, we need to pass the cybersecurity bills. We need to get these through. Plus, we're demonizing Russia at the same time to show that they are getting ready to hit the United States with some type of cyber attack. They're building this up over time. Now, Robert Parry, who is a U.S. journalist that broke the story of Iran-Contra, he is out there and he is saying, which I completely agree with, he said back in 1977 when he started, it was a time when the U.S. press corps asked tough questions, understood its basic responsibility to the American people, and broke through many government lies, including the Pentagon Papers, Watergate scandal, the family jewels, CIA, and there's almost two sides to every story. And we can see right now, and he's saying that, listen, the case with MH17 disaster, after initial Washington's accusations against Russia without substantial proof, the U.S. government went completely silent and is holding back intelligence about what actually happened. He went to the CIA because they said they got updated information. And they said, oh no, we have nothing. We're not giving it to you. No, thank you. And we have to remember back in the time, MH17, as soon as it happened, the U.S. came out and said, yeah, it was Russia. So basically, they send out a press release. It goes to the corporate media. They do no investigative reporting, and they just report whatever the government wants them to report. This isn't journalism. This is propaganda. He said the American press should push the government on these things, not simply go with a flow and investigate and not just go with the flow. They should investigate what the U.S. government knows and why it is not helping to bring whoever was responsible to justice. The U.S. press corps acts as the government's propaganda conveyor belt, and I completely agree with him. They're not doing anything to see if these stories are true or not. They're just publishing whatever the government tells them, and it's propaganda. NDAA 2012 Amendment Rider 114, Section 501. The U.S. government can now use propaganda on the American people. And this is what the corporate media is doing right now. They are using propaganda to push their agenda. They know the collapse is coming. They understand the system's falling apart. And we can see the corporate media is worthless at this point. And this is why the alternative media, the new media, have popped up all over the internet. Because basically, we are countering what they are saying to make people think and say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And many people are doing investigative reporting, finding out the truth later on to show that, yeah, the government is not working for the people. Here is the proof. Look what they're doing. Jade Helm, Boston bombing, World Trade Center, MH17, on and on and on. The corporate media didn't come out and break any stories. They went along with the government. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.